Alright, I'm gonna do 5 vintage fragrances for winter. Now, these fragrances, I suggest that they are better in their vintage version, and since I love my classic fragrances, I recommend you hunt out the vintage version. Now, all these are in production except for one, the very last one on this list. I'm going in order of year. All these are favorites. Of course, I could have made a longer list, but I decided to feature 5 that people don't talk about as much. So, let's get right into this. This goes in order of year. So, number 1, British Sterling. This came out in 1965, I believe. Yeah, 65 or 67. I wrote it down, but I think it was 1965. And I'm just going to feature the most 3 prominent notes. So the most you get out of this is oak moss, nutmeg, and leather. This is an excellent scent. This is another one. I had a new version of it. It kind of smelled kind of jinky, so I went and found a vintage version. Vintage is definitely better. You look for something that says Mem Company on the bottle. I don't know if the camera will focus on it, but it says Mem. And that's the original makers, and they were also the original makers of English leather. But yeah, British Sterling, 60s classic, very good. Nobody talks about it. You gotta check it out. Next on the list, Royal Copenhagen. Once again, I had the new version of this, and I didn't like it, so I went out and hunted the vintage version. This one came out in 1970. What you'll get is musk, aldehydes, and lavender most prominent. So you get like a nice aldehydic, musky, powdery scent. Oh, it's so good. And definitely not for the faint of heart. Really good one. 1970 Royal Copenhagen. Next on the list, we have Pierre Cardin. And this came out in 1972. This was one of my grandfather's favorites. He also wore polo green and Brut. This is one of his favorites. 3 most prominent notes are sandalwood, oak moss, and leather. 1972. Once again, this is one I had a new version. 5-star fragrances. Kind of was like, I bet the vintage is better. Went out and found the vintage. And, yeah. Now, what sucks is I had a big 3.4 ounce bottle of this, and it broke in the move, and it was the vintage. So, no, I was left as this little vintage one. But, yeah. Maybe I'll find another bigger bottle later. I really do like this scent a lot. So, it's Pierre Cardin, 1972. Next on the list, another one. We have Oscar de la Renta, Pour Louis. This came out in 1980. This one I had bought the new version. I was like, oh, I didn't like the way it smelled. Just something about it, it just kind of smelled weird. So I was like, you know what? Let me find a vintage bottle. And once I found the vintage, it was amazing. So the most prominent notes on here are aldehydes, leather, and oak moss. And this is definitely a dressing up type of scent. It's very classy, very gentlemanly. So that's Oscar de la Renta, Pour Louis, 1980. And last but not least, one of my favorites, Balenciaga, Ho Hang Club. This came out in 1987. The most prominent notes are rose, resins, and leather. This is definitely not for the faint of heart. The rose is very strong on the opening. If you can get past that, you're good to go. The dry down is amazing. Now, I love rose, so the harsh rose opening doesn't bother me. But this is an excellent scent. And this came out in 1987. This discontinued, so you have no choice but to find the vintage bottle. So once again, all these scents, all better in their nice vintage versions. Oh, and this guy. So there you go. 5 vintage fragrances that will cut through the cold in your wintertime. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.